There you go. Are we live? Yeah.
Good to go. All right. Good evening. I'd like to call this Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019 meeting in Middletown City Council to order. Please stand and join me in a moment of meditation and the pledge of allegiance to the flag. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Vittori. Here. Mr. Bohannon.
Here.
Mr. Moon. Mr. Mulligan.
Here.
Mayor Mulligan.
Here. I'll entertain a motion to excuse Vice Mayor Moon. I know he has a conflict in Westchester. He's expected later today.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Ms. Vittori.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We have a couple presentations to do. I'd like to invite Rick Pierce, President and CEO of the Middletown, Monroe, and Trenton Chamber of Commerce, down the podium to receive this. Good evening, sir. Good seeing you. And thanks for coming down. It's certainly a privilege to be able to recognize the work the Chamber does. You can stand over here or wherever you want to be. I'm not sure where the cameras are anymore. I don't know. No, the work the Chamber does here in the community is really a testament to their support and their really impact across the region. I have the privilege of serving on their board, so I get to see some of their work firsthand. But they're leading the work in some of the business catalyst efforts across the region. They're working on careers and education for our youth. They're working on engaging our small business community in a lot of different ways and doing so much work throughout the community. So it's an honor to recognize their 75th anniversary here in Middletown this year with this proclamation. Whereas in 1917, a group of businessmen organized Middletown's Chamber of Commerce with the objective of pooling the resources of the area to aid in winning World War I. That early chamber consisted of 500 members. And whereas, soon after the war, Middletown began to prosper from a booming economy, and they hired their first executive director, Dwight Smith, to help manage Middletown's growth in the early 1920s and to meet the needs of the area. The Middletown Civic Association was created in 1924, and the chamber was absorbed into the organization and hired Mr. Smith to oversee operations. For the next 20 years, the city of Middletown experienced phenomenal growth. And whereas, in 1944, the Bureau of Commerce split from the Civic Association to form the Middletown's second Chamber of Commerce, the organization we now know today. In 1988, the Middletown Area Chamber of Commerce merged with the Monroe Chamber of Commerce and Trenton Chamber of Commerce to form the Mid-Miami Valley Chamber of Commerce. In 2003, the name was changed to Chamber of Commerce serving Middletown, Monroe, and Trenton. And whereas the Chamber of Commerce serving Middletown, Monroe, and Trenton is a membership-driven organization representing and working with businesses in our communities to improve the business climate and to attract new businesses, all the while working with these cities to retain existing businesses and industries. And whereas the Chamber of Commerce is a proactive advocate for business and professional organizations and is dedicated to developing, nurturing, and protecting a positive economic climate, the Chamber offers networking exposure through special events, sponsorship opportunities, leadership courses, and volunteer opportunities and referrals. Now, therefore, I, Lawrence Mulligan, by powers vested in me as Mayor of the City of Middletown, do hereby proclaim April 2nd, 2019 as a day fitting to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Chamber of Commerce serving Middletown, Monroe, and Trenton. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate you coming down. I'd like to offer to you, Rick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Council and City Manager Adkins. As you know, this is a unique experience for us because we traditionally don't receive awards. We hand them out. And as many of you know, going to councils and ribbon cuttings, that we give out a lot of awards. But thank you for that. I don't know if the audience paid much attention to when we were founded in 1917, but this is our 75th year, so I'll let you do the math on that. But thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming down. Now it's another privilege to recognize Public Health Week here in Middletown. Jackie Phillips kind of bumped out on me, but she left me some instructions. It's doing 100 years of public health. Again, I have the honor of serving as president of the Board of Health, and again, see firsthand some of the work that Jackie does throughout the community and the impact public health has in today's world where we're dealing with things like Ebola threats and E. coli and just making sure pools are safe and restaurants are safe. But we want to recognize their work with this proclamation. Whereas the week of April 1st through the 7th, 2019, is National Public Health Week. And whereas the City of Middletown Health Department, along with other local health departments throughout Ohio, are using the week to recognize 100 years of public health. And whereas this year marks the 100th anniversary of 2 legislative acts that helped shape the future of public health in Ohio. And whereas the Hughes Act and Griswold Act, both enacted in 1919, established the modern-day organization of public health departments. And whereas the Health District is reflecting on public health efforts from the past 100 years to honor how the past made public health matter. And whereas public health has added 25 years to American life expectancy, reduced motor vehicle crashes by 90%, and helped reduce sudden infant death rate by 50%. And whereas public health has eradicated smallpox, increased vaccinations against polio and other preventable diseases, reduced tobacco use, and improved maternal and infant health care. Now therefore, I, the Mayor of Middletown, do hereby proclaim the week of April 1st through the 7th, 2019 as National Public Health Week, and call upon the people of Middletown to celebrate the 100 years of public health and how the past has made public health better. And she gave me some notes here too in terms of some of the achievements that we've accomplished in our 100 years of public health. Recognizing the impact of immunizations, and some of these reflect in the proclamations, and the control of infectious diseases, declines in deaths from heart disease and stroke, making our restaurants and stores safer with healthier foods, improving maternal and infant health, the reduction of tobacco use, and public health preparedness and response, cancer screenings and education, breastfeeding support, motor vehicle safety, and vector and mosquito control programs. And some additional achievements that we've done here at Middletown and other areas result in the fluoridation of drinking water to prevent dental cavities, working with family planning and contraceptive services, and improved occupational safety, as well as lead exposure and poisoning prevention. And we want to recognize the work of our own health commissioner, Jackie Phillips, who's so active in the community and engaged in so many different things. We just attended an event last Saturday recognizing the work in Butler County here in Middletown to address infant mortality, and a great community baby shower at the community center, and certainly appreciate her work on that. So on behalf of Jackie and the Board of Health, I'll present this to myself, and thank you, everybody. And, all right, next up we have our city manager reports. Mr. Atkins.
Your Honor, as you're aware, as council's aware, I'm a couple days back from being off for 2 weeks with the flu. I'm still coughing, and so the less I say tonight, the better.
Okay.
Which doesn't happen very often. So I will yield my time to the 175 people that want to speak tonight.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Best wishes for a speedy recovery. Glad you're on the mend. All right, we'll move on to our citizens' comments then. And let's see, I've got a number of cards here this evening. First I have is Ms. Sue Whitman.
Your Honor, Art Central would like to make a public presentation as an organization.
Okay. Okay, I see that. So the first three. Okay, I see that together. Okay, all right. So we have Sue Whitman, Randy Merrill, and Joe Whitman.
So my name is Sue Whitman. I live at 1504 North Briel Boulevard, and I'm the director of the Art Central Foundation. Mayor Mulligan, members of council, city staff, thank you for allowing the Art Central Foundation to update you on a project we've been working on for the last year. The Art Central Foundation has been a champion of downtown Middletown for the last 14 years. Do you realize our first program, Got Art, installed original artwork in the vacant storefronts along Central Avenue? Before any businesses occupied these spaces, we were washing windows, painting storefronts, removing dead animals and trash, installing temporary walls and lights. We put up the best face possible on our city to drive interest in our downtown, setting the stage for the Pendleton Art Center to bring working artist studios to town. When another champion of downtown Middletown, Harry Finkelman, passed away, do you realize the ACF took over his festival, Music on Main? This became the Main Street Art and Music Festival, which for 5 years featured regional musicians playing on 3 stages in downtown. The festival included activities for families and children, and one year even included a fireworks show. This set the stage for the current Broad Street Bash summer concert series. When the city of Middletown couldn't afford a tree lighting ceremony during the holidays, do you realize the ACF started a fair on the square? We had trees donated, installed them in the park, decorated and lit them, provided horse-drawn carriage ride, showcased our many performing arts groups' holiday offerings. This set the stage for the Santa Parade. All of these events and festivals were provided at no cost to the city and the citizens of Middletown. And while the ACF has moved our focus away from festivals and events, we still continue to help beautify our town with public art. Since 2011, the ACF has produced 11 pieces of public art, all involving community partners, residents, and our students. Again, at no cost to the city. We have participated in Keep Middletown Beautiful Earth Day cleanup for many years, bringing volunteers to paint and beautify many of the downtown properties. We have power washed the community center twice, and last year painted the entire exterior. 10 years ago, we found our focus in the visual arts education. Our workshop program gives free art classes to the children from Middletown and the 6 surrounding districts. These classes have impacted over 1,600 students. Many of these students, after graduation, come back to visit, volunteer, and even teach for the ACF. As our program grew, so did our need for space of our own, and we became the tenants of yet another downtown champion, Perry Thatcher. As renters, we cared for the building, and when he passed, the ACF was one of the nonprofits chosen to receive part of his property as outlined in the will. As a local campus of Cincinnati State planned to open, the city of Middletown acquired all of Perry's buildings, displacing tenants. Art Central Foundation was forced to leave the building we loved and spent the next 2.5 years negotiating with the city to honor Perry's wishes and gift the Art Central Foundation the building at 4 North Main. Rededicated the Thatcher Temple Arts Building, it is now our permanent home and has become a source of revenue for the foundation. Downtown champions like Finkelman and Thatcher loved these historic buildings and at times kept them from being torn down. The ACF is here today because we had the good fortune of being in the right place at the right time. In March 2018, Cincinnati State presented us the opportunity to acquire the First National Bank building at 2 North Main. After a year of research, committee meetings, walkthroughs with developers, we accepted Cincinnati State's offer. Next, you will hear from Randy Merrill from McGill Smith Punch and Design Firm, who have been our expert advisors in this development process. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Randy Merrill, and my address is 3700 Park 42 Drive, Suite 190B, Cincinnati, Ohio. How you guys doing?
Go ahead. Good. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to be here to present McGill Smith Punchin's qualifications, and we're very excited to partner with this group to look at the building. We have done numbers of adaptive reuses like this. It's a very exciting building. It's got great bones, and we're very excited about the opportunities that this building could possibly bring to the city of Middletown. Do you have any questions of me in terms of vision for the project, or there's lots of things we're thinking about doing with the project if it moves forward?
I don't know, we're really not set up for a dialogue this evening for this.
I understand.
But,
okay, there you go.
come down
well, just so you know, we've done probably 10 to 20 adaptive reuses like this. We're very experienced with it. And hopefully that gives you the confidence that this group's doing the right thing.
Okay, thank you for joining us this evening. All right, next we have Mr. Joe Whitman.
You need my address?
Sure, please.
Joe Whitman, 1504 North Braille Boulevard, Middletown, Ohio.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've reviewed the background and the history of the Art Central Foundation because we understand there are those in this room who do not believe in the capabilities of our organization. We have brought experts from MSP who have been our trusted advisors throughout this process. We hope that the city understands the commitment we have made to drive our city and our foundation forward. We'd like to remind everyone here that when the Art Central Foundation took possession of our building, it came with no funds from the city. The Art Central Foundation has never asked or received any funding from this city, with the exception of facade grant money, which has been available and used by all downtown property owners. Unlike many other projects that the city has invested large amounts of money into, the ACF has a 100% track record of taking an older, unused property and successfully getting it back to full use. It is important to remind the city that 2 and 4 North Main have been developed as a pair for the last 50 years. They have been designed to complement each other and have many shared features. The ACF is in a perfect position to understand and enhance what each building brings to the table and how they could both be used to assure success in the development process. There are facts about the success rates of buildings that have been transferred from the city to other groups that we think is interesting. We've noted that when buildings are sold or transferred to people who live, work, and have deep roots in Middletown, the projects are successful. When buildings are owned by people or corporations who live in other towns or states, the properties have not had the same rate of success. There is no one more motivated to see the First National Bank building succeed than the Art Central Foundation. When we decided to accept the challenge of developing 2 North Main, we accepted a risk to our foundation that many would not have taken. We are risking our financial resources, our reputation, and quite possibly the future of our mission. Yet our board of directors, most who are here tonight, each and every one of them stood up and committed their time, their passion, and their professional expertise to make sure this project will be successful. Not one person on the ACF board of directors will walk away with a penny from their involvement in this project. So why do this? Why did we take on this risk? Why did the ACF board unanimously commit to such a project? We saw this as an opportunity to increase our service to our community by establishing a source of revenue that would be in place for years to come. It would also save an iconic building that is important to our city. We would be honoring and continuing the legacy of Perry Thatcher and all the others who have been a part of the fight to keep Middletown growing and prospering. We imagined that news of our plan to bring First National Bank back to life would be met with enthusiasm. Not so much. So why are we here tonight? Because the city administration has questioned the motives and ability of the Art Central Foundation to manage this project. We are here because we ask a simple question of ourselves, a question, it turns out, that was asked many times by Perry Thatcher. What if? We began as a small group of friends trying to help Middletown turn things around, asking, what if we have a festival? What if we paint a mural? What if we start classes for kids? For the last year, we have been working hard to prepare the groundwork to successfully develop another property, because we want to do more. We want to offer more. We want to impact our community more. We intend to do more. We want to offer year-round classes. We want to give the city more public art. We want to make sure that 2 North Main is developed in a way that enhances the Middletown experience. We want to make sure the Art Central Foundation is self-sufficient for decades to come. We want to make a difference in tens of thousands of kids' lives. We want to do more. The only thing that stands in our way is the decision that is going to be made by the city we have served. What if? What if we can get you to change your minds and allow us to complete our agreement with Cincinnati State to acquire the First National Bank building? We are thankful to the council for this opportunity to tell some of our story publicly tonight, and we're thankful to meet with you later in executive session.
Thank you. Next up, I have Mr. John Brzezinski. Did I get that right? My apologies.
You got it.
If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, sir. My name's John Prazinski, and I live at 4963 Cedar Brook Court in Liberty Township, Ohio. I'm here representing the Butler Warren Association of Realtors, and would like to talk about the vacant property registration ordinance. We feel as realtors that it would be vitally important that this city continue to be business friendly and property owner friendly. And we feel like pushing this through right now this quickly probably is not the best for the property owners. I think the property owners deserve the right to have more of a voice heard and maybe even do a little bit more of an in-depth study. And so that's what I'm here for. I'm not as eloquent as the past two speakers, but would like to make sure that I'm on the record saying that on behalf of our association.
Okay. Thanks for coming down this evening. Next, I have Mr. Dennis Vittori. Mr. Vittori. Good evening. If we could get your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Dennis Vittori, 6853 Cloister Cliffs, Middletown. My family has been in Middletown since 1922, 1925, starting two businesses, one which is still in operation today. I'm a lifelong resident of Middletown. My family owns property, commercial property downtown Middletown. We own residential property in downtown. We also have 3 businesses downtown. I'm also chairman of Downtown Middletown, Inc. Just a couple of points about this legislation. DMI's Economic Restructuring Committee submitted a proposal to the city on this legislation in November of 2018. Our committee had been working on this for a number of years. There's discussions on this proposed legislation going back to 2013. DMI actively began working on this proposal in late 2016. I think this legislation, in our mind, seeks to address problems caused by vacant properties, such as fire safety, transient occupancy, also the change conditions that are contrary to the efforts of rehabilitating and maintaining surrounding buildings. We feel this legislation is one of the tools that's needed to help make our downtown vibrant. We also feel it will assist our community in driving growth and increasing our downtown sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Next, I have Mr. Walter Leap. Mr. Leap. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Walter Leap, 2024 Central Avenue.
Good evening.
Good evening to you. And I'm here just to speak regarding the ordinance for the vacant property, and I would like to see it tabled if we could do that for further discussion. And I think we have a number of people that have a lot of interest in this ordinance and property in Middletown, and they would like to have a little more time to digest and speak to the city people regarding that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Next card I have this evening is from Mr. Larry Lewis. Mr. Lewis. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Larry Lewis, 3221 Union Road, Franklin, although we're in Middletown, okay, annexed here. I too oppose the vacant property legislation that's trying to be enacted. It's a lot of history in Middletown. People who own property in Middletown didn't buy the property open the doors up, sit inside with an empty chair and say, hey, I've been successful. In other words, we don't want it to be rented. There's people out there talking about the ones who have property don't want to rent the property. Well, that's not true. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of money. And unless you're getting a lot of money funded through the city, it's easy to point fingers and say this should be done, that should be done, and it takes time, patience. I wish the people of the council would consider letting the free market dictate like it always has and always will. There are safety issues on vacancies, things of that nature, I understand. Those can be addressed. To me, there's existing legislation already that can address those items. Middletown has a rich history. A lot of people are responsible for Middletown coming back. It is coming back. The last 10, 12, 14 years has come back quite well. Not one person is going to bring it back on their shoulders. It takes many people in the past are responsible for Middletown right now coming back. I hope you consider table, give us time maybe to look at it some more, and maybe work together instead of working apart.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Have Mr. Gary Armstrong. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Gary Armstrong, 4385 Salisbury Court, Franklin again, but part of the city of Middletown. I was involved in 2012, 2013. I've been in Middletown resident for about 10, 12 years. We started buying a few rental properties. Don't have a lot, have nothing downtown. But did get involved with the IPOA, and we were here with the red shirts back in 2012, 2013 when we were going to do we started talking about vacant property. Sat in meetings for not since November of 18, but for a year and a half with a lot of people, a lot of minds, zoning people on the board of zoning and everything. And we went through all this back then and said that this was the way to handle it. We talked about absentee owners and all that kind of stuff, and we bounced that back and forth for a year and a half. And I know that from DMI's perspective, maybe that they think this is something that's been talked about, but it was not near as visible as it was back then. I mean, we heard about this. I'm also part of the SORG board, and we heard about this a couple weeks ago. Denise and Ken came and spoke a little bit then, sort of saying, well, does this affect us? And at the time we said, well, we're really looking for people that are vacant owners, you know, so that sort of satisfied us until I went and looked at the ordinance. And being an engineer by training, and I operated a $40 million company for about 33 years. I started looking at this, and what I really have is a lot of questions about even how the ordinance is written. Not so much, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. There are areas there, and the first thing that jumped out at me is that it says, you know, unoccupied is 50% of the square footage. So, you know, the question is I don't think there are many properties here in Middletown that even make the point that that they are occupied that much even when they're renting the downstairs. I mean, it appears that there's a thing that was said here that sort of validates the fact that almost anybody here could fall under this vacant property registration. The penalties for it are extreme. It's not only the fact that you register each year, but that's doubled each year, so that after 5 years there's a $3,200 per year penalty if somebody decides to hold the property. You know, what is intended use? You know, what happens if it's vague? I mean, who determines what the intended use of that property? What if I wanted to buy a property, hold it for 5 years, and then sell it? Hopefully the economy would go better. I'd pay the taxes, take care of all that kind of stuff. This thing is a very vaguely written, very subjective, and a very hard to enforce regulation, and I just think we ought to really consider tabling it, talking about it, and seeing what we can do in the past. That's my
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Our next card I have is from Miss Rachel Lewitt. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. Rachel Lewitt, 2804 Central Avenue, Middletown.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, our council, city manager. I am here to speak about the proposed ordinance in opposition. I am the broker and owner of Finkelman Real Estate, and we are proud to call downtown home since 1937. My family has actually been in Middletown since about 1910. I own property in downtown. I represent people that own property in downtown. I transact business in downtown and put people to work in downtown. Respectfully, I saw this ordinance this past Saturday, and I do have concerns. I feel the legislation is heavy-handed and could prevent future arm's-length real estate transactions and put current and future owners at risk. Who would want to invest in a city that has so many regulations and legislation that is just sometimes too difficult and cumbersome to want to do business there and want to invest there? And maybe they would find another community where it's easier and they have the same dynamic project, but they find a community that has less regulation and they go locate there. How do we continue to develop and grow our entire city and downtown Middletown when we have more hammers than assistants? Why take money out of the hands that are feeding our community? Why overregulate a free market system? The legislation can be interpreted as trying to tell the public how to run their business and how to make their independent business decisions for them. Developing partnerships and incentives with the private sector encourages redevelopment. Mandates generally discourage investment, and most of us know that. The investors that are out here, property owners, we work our tails off. You know that. We go from one project, fill our coffers, and try to go to the next project. We are working to make this community a better place, and that is a private business decision. On the real estate transaction side, I did not see in the ordinance a provision for leasing, and I know Councilman Moon did bring that up at the last meeting, and I appreciate that. So there's only this provision for the leasing side, and that is just one very small example of a place where we could have more discussion, make some revisions and modifications to the ordinance. And while I would love everyone to list with a broker and a realtor, one and the same, that is a private property rights decision. More, knowing this market, you should understand that it is not always feasible to lease a property within 6 months. It is not necessarily feasible to sell a property within a year. I have the statistics to prove this. The market drives this, not the government. It is not uncommon for a property to sit and take several years before it is sold. I was pulling the statistics today. I found 3 different properties on Central Avenue that took approximately 7 years. The pressure to occupy or sell within a timeline set by the city is going to force the market and business or property owner to make decisions that may impede the positive growth and progress of downtown that we're seeking. There may be unintentional consequences and then come to a point of diminishing returns, people divesting and defeating the intent of this ordinance. I respectfully ask that you allow room for discussion with a wider input from those who could be impacted prior to moving forward with this legislation. Please table this reading until we are able to iron out some details and come to a better solution for our locals. Build consensus, create an improved product on the front end, not after the fact, and the outcomes will be more fruitful. So what if? Let's give it a try. Let it be we instead of a few me. Let it be we. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next card I have this evening is from Mr. Dan Tracy. Mr. Tracy. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Ian Tracy. I live at 4921 Oaks Court, Middletown, Ohio. Good evening to council, city manager, mayor. I'm an investor in Middletown. Been an investor for the last 32 years. I've been successful in this town. What I've seen happen in downtown Middletown since 2007, 2008, and where we are today did not happen with an ordinance like this. It happened with the ordinance that we put together back in 11 and 12 and 13. That ordinance covers most of what this ordinance is trying to say. If we put this ordinance into effect, if I was an investor, I would not want to invest in downtown Middletown because of the ordinance, because of the hammer that's going to drop on me if I don't get it listed, don't get it sold, don't get it rented. This is something that Middletown has grown so much in the last 10 years. Don't fix something that's not broke. It isn't broke. The ordinance that we have will do what this ordinance is trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Next card I have this evening is from Diddy Gordon. Is everything right? I'll bring my reading glasses. Is that Brandon?
Brandon.
Dickie Brandon. Sorry about that. Gotta get my cheaters out here, so running late. So good evening.
It's called old age.
Yeah, well, that's the reason I call them cheaters. So, can we get your name and address for the record, please?
Dickie Brandon, 515 Hidden Creek Drive, Monroe, Ohio.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me, Mayor, the council. I want to talk about that ordinance, the table of that ordinance. You know, I've lived in Middletown all my life. I'm an investor and I'm a builder. I own this substantial amount of property in Middletown. And I took on buying some commercial property downtown from just encouragement back in the day from Perry Thatcher and Mr. Finkelman. And Rachel said it well. You know, she said it very well that I'm all for bringing businesses down to Middletown and making sure that these properties are done. I own a building at 1721 Central Avenue, and it's one of the best looking properties on Central Avenue. I hadn't asked a dime from the city of Middletown for abatements or any help in assisting to do this project. It's going to be a nonprofit project that I've been working on for some time, and I had to table it because of my illness. This ordinance, I think, you know, I sit on the board of rehabilitation for downtown Middletown as well, and I think that should be a discussion that should be brought to us on that board to get different insight, also from the different investors in the chambers of commerce, because nobody wants blighted property downtown because it doesn't stimulate growth, you know. But as Dan Tracy said, we have ordinances in place for that, you know. But penalizing, I think it's, you know, when you take on, and I think you well know, when you take on one of these old buildings like I've taken on, it's horrendous. The cost is astronomical. You know, the building I'm doing is going to be an all green building. It's going to be all energy efficient. And the cost to make that building, the state of the art type of building, is a lot of money. And it takes a lot of time to do that, especially when you're doing it yourself, you know, or you're applying for a nonprofit status, which I've just received after 8 months. I had to table it. So I want the council to take that in consideration and table this ordinance, and let's just look at this at a later date and get some more insight from different developers, realtors, chamber of commerce people, and then revisit it at a later date, you know. But I think, you know, as we have it right now, the timeline, the cost, I think it's just something that could be waited out and not rushed through the system. That's all I have.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming down and share your thoughts this evening. All right, next card I have is from Sham Reedy. Good evening. We get your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Shyam Reddy. My address is 513 Windsor Park Drive, Centerville, Ohio.
Good evening.
Good evening. I just want to thank the Chamber and the Council to give us the opportunity to speak our thoughts on this ordinance. I just had a little bit of just very short time to go through that, and the reason I'm here is to speak on behalf of my fellow investors and realtors, because I've been in the legislative field for about 24 years. I serve on the Greater Dayton Apartment Association, Greater Dayton Real Estate Investors Association, and also at the state level. Just a couple of thoughts on what I could grasp from what I read. There are state regulations and laws for every county to have their owners record their property with the county. It was passed several years ago, so individual cities don't have to go through this. But it's not being implemented properly at the local level. So that's where you can already get the information for the people that own these properties without having to register again, just because they're vacant properties. That's one. Now, just based on the talking I did, is there a big problem here? And I got some numbers, but they are probably the nationwide or statewide numbers, but I don't think the situation warrants at this time to push this ordinance through without having the input from all interested parties. And most of the people that I represent are mom and pop operations. Nobody wants to keep their properties vacant, mostly because they may not have enough money. They bought a property because they saw a potential, and then they ran into problems and they sit on it, they do pay rents, and they do maintain the properties. But it does take some time with the private investments to rehab the property, do what they want to do with it. Also, our members create a lot of jobs when they rehab these properties. Okay, and they don't ask for any assistance from any cities most of the time. So my suggestion here is to see if you could just back off a little, table it, and invite different parties that have any interest in this matter to kind of look through. The reason I can tell you this is because I've been working with cities around Dayton area, the Fairborn and the Kettering, West Carrollton, Trotwood, you just name them. Because every time they come up with their ordinance, we want to sit down with them, and most of the time, we don't always get our point across, but most of the time, we can turn around, we sit and find a solution that works for all the parties. That's all I want to do here, is to just rethink it over. I don't think there's a lot of thought went into this one. Maybe you're trying to rush some things, which may get some unintended consequences in the process of solving the problem. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Next card I have this evening is from Ms. Denise Brodsky. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Denise Brodsky, 662 South Washington Boulevard, Hamilton, Ohio. Mayor Mulligan, City Council members, City Manager and staff, members of the public, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening on Ordinance 02019. I'm here on behalf of the Sorgapa Revitalization Group. First of all, I want to commend DMI and the City Manager and Council on your efforts to find a way to eliminate blight and abandonment. In my previous work with an agency in Cincinnati whose mission was just that, I truly understand the economic impact and the health and safety risks they pose. However, I firmly believe there is a distinct difference in our city's circumstances from that of other cities between abandoned and blighted versus vacant or unoccupied. Throughout the ordinance, it refers to vacant and abandoned as though in all cases vacancy leads to blight, which I disagree wholeheartedly. Reference page 1, paragraph titled Evidence of Vacancy. The description given lends itself more to the issue of abandonment and blight. There are many vacant buildings in the urban core that are not abandoned or blighted, but just lack tenants to occupy them. Something the city's Economic Development Office could have a positive role in attracting suitable new businesses to occupy those spaces in collaboration with the building owners. With respect to the Sorg Opera House, as we continue to seek major gifts and funding to raise the necessary gap funding, which is approximately $4 million, required to apply for historic tax credits and enter into a partnership with a for-profit developer, we are concerned with certain provisions of the ordinance that could cause both a financial burden over time and have unintended consequences on our chances of obtaining highly competitive historic tax credits through the state of Ohio. And I might want to add that we also qualify for new market tax credits along with the historic tax credits at the federal level and the state level. While parts of the theater are occupied via our temporary occupancy, others are not. Under the description of unoccupied, which states 50% or more that is lacking in commercial activity, will cause future attempts to acquire historic tax credits problematic in that under Ohio's scoring process, weighted preference is given for buildings that are underutilized or not occupied and will generate a greater catalytic impact upon completion of their rehabilitation. Projects that are 95% to 100% vacant are scored 15 points, while properties that are 40% to 54.99% vacant are scored 7. Due to the competitive nature of the state's historic tax credits, this ordinance could cause this project to be disqualified. Additionally, any improvements to the unoccupied building prior to the submission of tax credits may not be considered qualified real estate expenses or QREs, and cannot be recouped if the improvements are not related to basic health and safety repairs and our future structural deterioration, with specifically like the roof. Dollars spent on non-QREs are not refundable under this program, which when combined with federal historic tax credits could recoup up to 45% of the total construction cost. That's money that we do not want to leave on the table. Other provisions of this ordinance with regards to the 90-day time frame, the structure deemed a vacant property is also problematic in our situation. Given the estimated time to raise the required gap funding, following the timeline for historic tax credit application, which itself takes about 6 months, coupled with a 24 to 64-month construction timeline, it may be a few years before the commercial building is in full service and occupied. In 2018, we were blessed to have been awarded $250,000 from the state's biennium capital budget for HVAC, electrical upgrades, and a few other improvements, which we just finally managed to finish, which we are still in the process of doing with the second phase of our HVAC. This funding is appropriated only on even years or every other year. It took us 2 tries over a course of 4 years, and Mayor Mulligan, you were a part of some of those discussions, to convince certain local state officials this project was worthy of funding. It was a major milestone. It has been suggested that we go for it again in 2020, and we will. The point is, if this ordinance is enforced, it could cause additional hardship, stress, and a distraction from our established priorities for rehabilitation and our focus on building our operational capacity. It takes time, commitment, community support, and patience to transform our historic properties, to preserve our history, and once again contribute to the vitality and growth of our community. I'd like to quote from my daughter Julia, who is a community planner for TSW in Atlanta, Georgia, which is the epicenter of urban redevelopment. And I'll paraphrase really quickly, trying to combat vacant buildings in a community is a good thing. Vacant buildings are a leading cause of crime, etc. But trying to force it via a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. This in turn makes it difficult for nonprofits such as the Sorg and others in this room who are doing good for the community to bail out or leave due to a lack of funds available to pay new fees that are imposed with this change. There should rather be levels or criteria possibly based on use, Does it have temporary occupancy and/or age of the structure? Is it a historic property? And/or time it sat vacant with no investment whatsoever?
Ms. Prosecutor,
Eventually,
can I
yes.
get you to wrap up, please?
I will. So while this has been a lot of work by DMI on this legislation, there is room for improvement. It's not too late. I urge you to table the second reading and allow yourself, the city, to consider all the concerns you'll hear tonight. Make sure this ordinance is in fact not punitive, not contradictory with other state programs addressing vacant historic properties, does not lead to unintended consequences that could cause existing and future owners to abandon their projects due to increased financial burdens, whose interpretation is not subjective and left to the discretion of one city official when granting exemptions, but instead levels the playing field and is thoughtful, innovative, and equitable for all those affected. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next card I have this evening is from Miss Betsy Hanovan. Ms. Hanovan? Good evening. Could we get your name and address for the record, please?
Good evening. Betsy Hanovan, 800 South Main Street, Middletown, Ohio.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Mulligan, council members, city manager, and city staff. I am here this evening to speak in favor of the proposed vacant property legislation. In 2011, my husband and I purchased a vacant, dilapidated residence on South Main Street. When you stood in the kitchen and looked up, you could see sky. Copper had been cut out of the home, so there was no functioning plumbing. All the electric needed to be updated. We put our blood, sweat, tears, and money into a full renovation. We knew the responsibility we were taking on. We embraced it, and we did it. During our 7 years in Middletown, we have seen many other vacant homes and storefronts be brought to life. The revitalization is truly inspiring. That being said, we've also seen the same properties continue to sit vacant, resulting in further deterioration as years pass. If current ordinances are effective, we wouldn't see so many properties without progress. If we want our city to continue progressing forward, something must be done. Yes, this will take time. Yes, this will take money. And yes, this will take extreme knowledge. The penalties, someone said, are extreme, but so is inaction. The vacant property legislation will benefit every resident of Middletown, in my opinion. If property owners are held accountable and renovation takes place, the city as a whole becomes more attractive to potential residents and developers, thus increasing the demand for property. And as demand increases, so will all of our property values. So, that being said, with the utmost respect, I would ask those who say it cannot be done, those who do not have the knowledge, the time, or the money to do it, or those who simply do not want to get it done, to please step out of the way of those who are able to get it done. One final note, I am a private investor and I do own a second property, 712 South Main Street. When we put that property up for rent, it went in a heartbeat. Yes, it's resident compared to commercial, but the reason it rented was because we put our time, sweat, and money into that renovation, and it was a beautiful property. We had more tenants lined up to rent that than we could have ever dreamt of in very little time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the last card I have this evening is from Mr. John Ellison. Mr. Ellison. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
John Ellison, 7156 Brightwaters Court, Hamilton.
Good evening.
I'm the president of the Butler County Real Estate Investors Association. And sitting out here in the audience, I've listened to all these people. Most of them, they want Middletown to do great, just as you do. Everyone's got their ideas. They just want to be able to express those ideas. And I think that it would be a shame for this to be passed tonight. I think that we need to slow down, listen to what all these other folks have to say, kind of get it all aired out. And
what would be the harm of maybe waiting a couple months to get this passed if it's going to improve it? These ordinances are hard enough to enforce, even if they're great. I think this one could be made better. And in the long run, isn't that what we're all looking for? You know, you've got a lot of Middletown people that are wanting to invest in their hometown. And also, you've got a lot of people that are outside of Middletown wanting to invest in Middletown. And you're looking for both of those. You want investment. You want people that care. And there's nothing wrong with somebody from out of Middletown coming in here to buy a building, to make money, to improve Middletown's situation. It's all good. I just think that there's a lot of ideas out here. People want you to listen to those. And I know in the long term, that's what we all want. We want Middletown to prosper. I mean, look, in the past 10 or 12 years, Middletown's really been looking up. A lot of good things are happening up here. And I think, well, what would be the harm in waiting a little bit, talking it over, getting a lot of input? You know, that's great. You know, I think that we should do that. And that's what I'm here to ask you for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you coming down this evening. All right, that's all the comment cards I've received. We don't have any more, do we? Okay, well, thank you. With that, we can move on to our agenda. That brings us to the consent agenda. Ms. Skank?
For your consideration this evening, we have the approval of the City Council minutes from March 19th, 2019. To receive and file Board and Commission minutes from the Board of Health, February 12th, 2019. The Citizens Advisory Board from October 19th, 2016, January 25th, April 12th, July 19th of 2017, January the 17th, May 16th, July 18th, and September 18th of 2018, and January 16th of 2019. To receive and file an oath of office for Austin Ida Miller, to confirm the termination of Bruce Hopper, part-time bus driver, Administrative Services Department, Division of Transit, to appoint Steve Lewis to the Park Board, declare April Fair Housing Month, to recognize April 2nd as National Service Recognition Day, to receive and file the final assessments for the 2018 Sidewalk Curb and Gutter Program, and to confirm the appointment of Megan Ellis to the position of Human Resources Clerk in the Department of Administrative Services, Division of Human Resources.
Okay, do we have a motion for the approval of the issues and actions as listed on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
All right, that brings us to our motion item this evening.
Toward the contract for the Sunset Park Green Infrastructure Project to Majors Enterprises Incorporated at the lowest and best bid in an amount not to exceed $2,714,486.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Mr. Atkins?
Yes, Your Honor, this is the first project in the long-term control plan. It consists of construction of a storm sewer to intercept a portion of the stormwater flow where it enters the combined sewer near the intersection of Shelton and Santa Fe. The intercepted flow from the drainage area will be redirected to approximately 1 acre regional green infrastructure retention basin located at Sunset Park, reducing the stormwater loading into our combined sewer system. A new storm sewer will be installed on Sheldon between Kenwood and Santa Fe Drive. But they will also repave the streets in that area. 4 contractors submitted bids. Majors Enterprises was the lowest and best bid.
Okay. Any questions or comments from Mr. Atkins? Just to clarify, Mr. Atkins, and I apologize for not following up with an email on this. This is as presented with the community group that we met with this past summer and
Correct,
along those designs. Yes. Changes or corrections? Okay, thank you. No other questions or comments? Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Abstain.
Okay, that brings us to council comments this evening. Mr. Mulligan?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no comments tonight.
Mr. Bohannon?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and speaking their mind about their point of views on these issues. I, too, have issues regarding this ordinance that's out here. Being an investor myself, I don't own anything downtown, but we all want this city to grow. We want this city to develop. When the city decided they wanted to have a registration for residential landlords, we were able to come together, form committee, meet with Mr. Adkins, some other city officials. This was before I was on council. And over a time frame of probably a year and a half, we were able to come up with a resolution that was favorable for everyone. And it went very well, and everybody's been following the rules in that. I understand what's going on downtown. There are some buildings downtown that some out-of-town landlords aren't following through on, getting them rented, fixing them up, this type of thing. They're sitting vacant. And businesses that are thriving and trying to grow look at it as being a heartache to their business and want to see the city develop. I believe that this can be worked out as well. There are areas of this agenda that, like everyone has said, are duplicates of what's already enforced. Biggest problem is trying to enforce all the ordinances that are on the books. But I think if we can get together, and if Mr. Adkins can do the same thing he did before with the landlords, get landlords and investors that actually have property downtown, and there's a number of them in the audience right now. I know Mr. Vittori says he's got 2 or 3 going on downtown right now. The young lady says that she's got a couple businesses downtown or residential buildings, and I know residential buildings very well, and they do rent very well when they are fixed up and looking pretty. I myself have the same situation. I have 25 and 30 applicants apply for my houses when they become available. So there is a way to make this work equitable for everybody concerned. I think the biggest concern that the landlords have are the fees that are all being issued in this ordinance. They want the same thing everybody else does. Let's get these buildings occupied. Let's get money flowing through these buildings. Let's make this city beautiful. Let's just get some time under our belt and sit down as a group and discuss this thing. It may take another year. It took 1.5 years for us as residents to get that taken care of from the residential landlord standpoint. Let's put the brakes on this thing. Let's sit down, form a group, let the investors come together with DMI and sit down and come up with a solution. Also, I'd also like to pass on my condolences. Found out this morning that Greg Clark, a musician here in town, passed away. He evidently was sitting in his recliner and had a heart attack. So I don't know how many of you know Greg Clark. I know he's been out on a lot of the events that we've had around town. But yeah, he passed away this morning, so I want to pass on my condolences to the family. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Vittori?
I have a lot of comments about this legislation, which probably will come up when we discuss the legislation itself, but I will say that it is based on best practices of what's being done all across Ohio in cities just like ours, all across the country in cities just like ours, with business owners and building owners who are passionate and love their towns and want to see the best, but at the same time have financial issues. And sometimes that's a tough choice to make. Am I going to fix my building up, or am I going to do something else? And that's a choice that a private entity should be able to make, but at the same time, it can't be at the sacrifice to the public. Within the last year, we've spent $1 million tearing 2 buildings down, taxpayer dollars. We've put firefighters at risk. When Middletown Paperboard burned down, we had to have 4 units come in. We had over 50 firefighters. It was 14+ hours. And do you know the reasons for the fire? As in the report from the chief, the vacant status, evidence of vandalism, lack of electric and gas. We have multiple buildings, and especially downtown. Why downtown? That's where the old buildings are. That's where we started. The majority of the older buildings are downtown. And there are a lot that are dilapidated. There are a few that could go up in flames tomorrow, and it would cost us millions. Tearing down paperboard, you don't even want to know how much that's going to cost us. So we have to think as a council about taxpayer dollars. That is where our focus has to be. We have to be responsible with how we spend it, and we have to be responsible to create an environment for growth. I understand nobody likes penalties, nobody likes fees. I don't. I try to negotiate with DirecTV because I don't want to pay. But at the end of the day, if a $400 penalty is going to keep you from buying a building downtown, you know what I say? Good. Because it's going to cost you a heck of a lot more to make that building rentable. So I don't think $400 should be a barrier to entry if you truly care about renovating. I had a building, I quickly renovated it. I had the spaces leased before it was even done, because why? I have ceilings. I have floors. Those are things that people who rent buildings want. They don't want to come in and start a business and have to put 40 grand in to help you take care of your building because you never did it. That's why your space isn't renting. I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Moon?
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, I just wanted to apologize for being late. I have continuing education classes all week in Westchester, and just couldn't get here.
You weren't
to
the only
start,
one.
so,
I was late too, but
so I apologize. And as to the ordinance, I'm sure we'll talk about it more in a little bit, but I certainly understand the concerns and the pros. I'm certainly very conflicted myself, and I'll just kind of leave it at that for now. So,
okay. Thank you. I'd just like to thank everyone for coming down this evening. It is good to have this spirited debate on a number of issues and get everyone's input. There is a lot of value in this, and it is part of the process. City manager long ago equated some of this to making sausage. Sometimes it's not the prettiest, but in the end it can taste pretty good, I guess. So, so we'll get there. We will work through this, but certainly appreciate everyone sharing their thoughts and their concerns. I would like to compliment the SORG. I had the privilege of attending an event there this past weekend. Fenwick had their high school musical there. The kids did a great job. The SORG was in great shape, and it was welcoming, and there were lines out the doors, and I think they had over 1,000, 1,500 people through there, so that was good to see that, and it was a good regional draw, so it was good to have that happen in downtown Middletown as well, and lots of good things. So with that, I think we can begin with our legislation, or Mr. Bohan, did you have a motion you wanted
Yes, I'd like to
make
make a motion that we table ordinance number 02019-18 until further date when we can have discussions on this.
That's a vacant property.
Vacant property issue, yes.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'd second.
Okay, any other discussion or comments?
I mean, I would just say that it's been in discussion since 2013. I mean, I got emails from people who are against this because they told me that they work 10 hours a day, they don't have time to read the paper, they can't meet in the afternoon, but they'd like to meet in person, but then they have to go home and make up for lost time around the house. So I think everyone downtown's busy. I personally am busy, but I make the time. I've made the time for city council. People have made the time to weigh in on this legislation. I think kicking it down the road another year, 2, 3 is a strategy, frankly. It's one that we've seen deployed already, so I would not be in favor. I know we're not voting yet, but.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I would just add I would support a delay, but not a year, year and a half, 2 years. I would say, I would ask Mr. Atkins in an expedited fashion to pull some of these same parties together that worked with the landlords, to not just kick the can down the road, but to make sure we get it right as opposed to just get it done.
I'd make 2 quick comments. Number 1, I'm finishing the drafting of the housing policy for the housing committee. You probably have 60 days before I can get to this. Realistically, I've got to keep all that going for the master plan. Again, that's up to council. The second piece is this isn't my ordinance. This came from DMI. This is driven by council. So if you want to bring a group together, somebody's going to have to give me enough feedback as to what it is I'm supposed to do so I can do my job. So don't just send me to the wolves, because I've dealt with them before. They're reasonable, but they're firm. And if I don't know what we're trying to get done, I'm not going to get anything done with these folks. So if you're going to table it and you want me to do something, you're going to have to give me enough direct input as to what it is you expect me to do so that I can successfully navigate.
I mean, I did the research. If you go online, I mean, the housing and urban development. I mean, there's so much research and proven outcomes where vacant property legislation works. I actually tried to find any paper that said when it didn't work, when it had a negative outcome. I couldn't find it. I mean, the research across the country, the examples from towns like ours, worse than ours, what have you, it's out there. And so again, to Doug's point, what are we asking him to do? Recreate the wheel, come up with different legislation? This was based on that same legislation. It was vetted through our legal department. I mean, if we're going to go out there, then we're going to be creating legislation that hasn't been done before. And that, to me, seems riskier, because then what is the proof? Again, I understand the hypotheticals. I understand the feelings. I prefer research. I prefer seeing other people and outcomes who've gone through it before us.
Other thoughts or comments?
Well, no, I think council should be prepared to move forward on this. We've had this in a work session dating back a couple months ago. DMI has been in discussions with it, as we heard from Mr. Curry, for months. I think it deserves an up or down vote tonight. I will make a comment about implementation. Even if it passes tonight, there's a 30-day window before it becomes effective. And also, there's actually a staff member that needs to be hired to administer this program and deal with it, and that hire hasn't been made yet. So you're looking at mid-year before that is done. Under the terms of the implementation of the actual ordinance, there is a waiver provision or for exceptions, and that can be for up to 1 year as long as it fits the criteria. So the fear that we couldn't have this passed tonight and any amendments made between now and whatever time anyone pays a $200 fine, I think is not valid. So we've got plenty of time to tweak this if need be, if it passes tonight, in the months or years before anyone pays a $200 fine. So I'm prepared to vote on it tonight.
Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, so our motion is to table item 4 on the agenda, the ordinance 2019-18. Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Mulligan.
No.
Ms. Vettori.
No.
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
No.
So the motion does not pass.
Right.
Okay. And with that, we can move on to our legislation for this evening.
Thank you, Your Honor. The first matter is Ordinance O 2019-15, an ordinance authorizing a contract with R.B. Juergens Contractors Incorporated for the 2019 Local Street Improvement Program. This is a second reading.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion or comments? We had a presentation on this last time, or Mr. Atkins, anything to add?
Nothing, Your Honor, thank you.
Anything from council? All right, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
The next matter is Ordinance O 2019-16, an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the Community Reinvestment Area Agreement between the City of Middletown and Mike Allen Real Estate Holdings, LLC, and Allen Group Enterprise, LLC, doing business as BMW Motorcycles of Greater Cincinnati. This is also a second reading.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments from council? We had a presentation on this last time. Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Item number 3 this evening is Ordinance O 2019-17, an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the Small Business Economic Development Grant Agreement between the City of Middletown and Mike Allen Real Estate Holdings, LLC, and Allen Group Enterprise, LLC, doing business as BMW Motorcycles of Greater Cincinnati. Second reading.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion or comments? Ties to a previous presentation. Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Number 4, Ordinance O 2019-18, an ordinance to enact Chapter 1458, registration of vacant property within Urban Core Central Zoning District. This is a second reading.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion or comments?
I would like to point out that there were some discussions about, would my property be subject to a fine? But one of the exemptions, and it's set forth in the ordinance, is if there's a current building permit and there's active construction on the property, that's not considered vacant, so you wouldn't be subject to the fine. My only other point was that again, the very months away from implementation, but the, let me make one other point. The 50% number, again, this was crafted from other downtowns in Ohio that have had success dealing with blight and abandonment. The 50% number is consistent with other cities' ordinances. I know the city of Canton, you might consider that a peer community. They also have the 50% number. And also the vacant property, unoccupied and unsecured, and there's 10 categories, it would be not used for its intended purpose for more than 180 days. So even sitting here now today, you have 6 months to get your property rented, to get it leased or get it sold or whatever you want to do with it. And that's beyond the 1 year of possible exemption if you're actually doing work for it. And if you're doing work on it, you have a building permit, then you're not subject to it. So there's a lot of opportunity to do some good. And again, if we get 6 months down the road and there's some issues with the implementation and enforcement of it, we can have discussions all along the way. And I'm happy to have those, and I'm sure staff is too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would just, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would just echo that, since it sounds like this will probably pass this evening. If there's tweaks that need made as we go along, I think council would be open to that. Like I had said last time, I thought a for rent option would be wise to put in there. And I think Mr. Mulligan and Ms. Vittori both addressed that in one of the exceptions, that they thought something might apply there. So that would be my only comment.
Okay. I was just going to offer too, I do appreciate everyone's perspective on this. It is a difficult spot. I do look back and I see the number of buildings that have sat rather vacant and underutilized in my time here on council, and it's time does fly. And I think it's worth trying a different approach. I'm not always in favor of the stick necessarily. I don't know if this is a stick, but it's a certainly motivating factor. I think we do owe it to all of our property owners, both that are currently there and both that are looking, to take a hard look at this in a year's time or 6 months' time, to get that input and understand where it's working, if we do need to adjust it. Staff has been very responsive in terms of getting us information on this. I do appreciate all the work DMI's put into researching this and present us some real workable solutions to address it. I look at the work DMI has done throughout the downtown area, and this is just kind of it's the core UCC area, and that's DMI's footprint. That's where they've been working most diligently. So I look forward to seeing how this works, and we'll do the vote.
If I could just add one more item. I did want to point out, since there's so many more folks here this week than there were 2 weeks ago, that there is a 10-year sunset on this, that council would have to take a proactive action to reinstitute this in 10 years. So it is not a program that will necessarily live on indefinitely, and I'm glad that's in there. That's all I have.
All right.
Mayor, if I could just add one. Yeah, I think there might have been some misconception that this would be citywide. It is not. It's just in the urban core district, basically around Central Avenue from Main Street to the railroad tracks. So it's very limited in scope, and you're talking about dozens of buildings, not hundreds. And as far as the city's commitment to downtown and what the taxpayers' commitment is to downtown, I put some thought into that. When the city embarked on removing the city center mall roof, that was, I think, a $13 million project. And so the city has, with state funds and local funds, millions of dollars have gone into that, and we're still paying it off to the tune of about $800,000 every year. $800,000 every year. And that will finally be paid off in a couple years. So you're looking at, with financing costs, $16 million that the taxpayer has put into downtown Middletown during this 20-year period. And that's significant, because that money could have been directed elsewhere. So we're looking for the same level of commitment from the downtown business owners. I'll also point out that in 2022, OKI will approve federal and state funds to redo all the streetscaping from the railroad tracks to downtown to the tune of $4.5 million. So in this 25-year period, the taxpayer has put in about $25 million. And I won't get my calculator out and start adding what the city's invested with DMI and so forth. So I think the taxpayer's been at the table, willing to help, ready to help more. This legislation is a small piece of that. So again, I'm happy to support it, but always open to crafting it and edits if we find that it's not doing what we would like for it to do. And that's all that I have. I won't ask for any more time.
Thank you. Anything else from council? Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Moon?
Had to start with me. Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
No.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Okay, legislation passes. Yes. Okay. And that brings us to next item.
5, Your Honor.
First reading, yes.
Ordinance O 2019-19, an ordinance adopting a policy for the honorary designation of public right-of-way and public facilities. Here for a first reading.
Okay, Mr. Atkins?
Yes, Your Honor. Periodically, citizens indicate they would like to honor some of our great past Middletown residents. We have been looking at a policy that would allow council to permit memorial designations for public roads and right-of-ways and facilities in a manner that honors the contributions of great Middletonians. We had a workshop on this earlier where we circulated a ordinance that was modeled after the Dayton, Ohio ordinance that seemed to be very well written. We talked about that at the workshop, adapted it to make sure it was consistent with the Middletown ordinances that are already in place, and it is now ready for your adoption.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Mr. Atkins? Okay. Last item this evening.
Last matter is ordinance O 2019-20, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing an amendment to a contract with National Water Services, LLC, for additional well drilling services. Also a first reading.
Okay, Mr. Atkins?
Yes, Your Honor. Back in October of 2018, the city took bids for drilling for new well. The bid was awarded to National Water Services for $167,925. They completed the drilling to the original time frame estimate of 140 feet. We believe an additional 20 to 40 feet is still needed to reach the bedrock for the next confining layer, but it is unknown at this point what the total depth will need to be to get that well functional. National Services has already been doing the work, and they've agreed to continue drilling at the unit cost of $477.34 per foot. We have funds appropriated in the 2019 well fund protection budget for this purchase, and we are asking that they be allowed to finish that well.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Atkins? Okay, thank you. With that, our last item on the agenda is an executive session, so I need a motion on the authority of Ohio Revised Code 121.22G1 to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, and also under the authority of Ohio Revised Code 121.22G2 to consider the purchase of property for public purposes or for the sale of property at competitive bidding if premature disclosure of information would give an unfair, competitive, or bargaining advantage.
So move.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
All right, following executive session will be in recess to our next meeting on April 16th, 2019 in these chambers. Thank you all and have a good evening.